Welcome back, viewers. Thank you once again for listening, and once again have another special player interview series. This time with an absolute legend of not just a player, but an absolute legend of a bloke, Scott Sattler. Scotty, once again, thank you for spending some time with us, answering a few questions, having a bit of a chat today. How's things going for you?
You're going well, Joel, and no, it's a pleasure to be here. Actually, it's life's good, and I suppose living on the Gold Coast is always a pretty simple life. Living on the Gold Coast, I once thought about moving back down to Sydney, but every time I go down there every Saturday to do radio, and I think every time I get off the plane and get into an Uber or a cab, I think no, it's too busy for me down here. So I like to settle back on the Gold Coast where everything's a little bit easier. So, life's good. Life's good. I can't complain. I'm healthy. I've got a great family, and things couldn't be better.
Yeah, and then let's not talk about the weather either. I know Sydney's freezing. Up here, we complain when it's 20 degrees. It's fantastic. We say it's probably a bit chilly at the moment, but let's talk about some of the clubs here. I know a lot of people associate you with the Penrith Panthers, but there was quite a journey for you to get to the Penrith Panthers originally, and there's a lot in your heart to do with where you're living at the moment on the Gold Coast. So we'll start with the Gold Coast Seagulls, where you made your debut against the Eels. Talk to us about the debut game and just that early part of your career with the Gold Coast Seagulls.
Well, Joel, I went to a school on the Gold Coast called Coomera High School, and there's only about 3 or 4 years old, the school, and I went there originally because I wanted to join the police force, but you had to be 18, and I was still 16 when I finished year 12, so I repeated year 12 at Coomera on the Gold Coast, and I didn't go there to play rugby league. I went there just to do another year of school so I can be close enough to 18. So, and then all of a sudden we formed this really good rugby league team. We went through and we won the state finals, and I was fortunate enough to make Queensland schoolboys, and then from there the local team, which is back then was the Gold Coast. Well, it was the Gold Coast Giants back then, and then which I was a scholarship holder with, one of those junior scholarship contracts, and then they became the Gold Coast Seagulls. And all I ever wanted to do, I never wanted to play for South Sydney, my dad's club, but I always wanted to just play for the Gold Coast. If I could have played 5 years with the Gold Coast and that was my career, I would have been really happy because I love the area, I love the region. So, in 1991, they had a team in the under 21s comp for the first time, where you played the whole season. At 1990, they did a trial. They played 4 games against Sydney teams, which I played in. And then 1991, a full season, which I played in. And then 92, we were coached by Grant Bell, the first coach of the North Queensland Cowboys. And in that team, there was myself, Jamie Goddard, Kevin Campion, Andrew Whittington, who played a lot of first grade with the Cowboys, Adrian Vowles, who went on to play Origin as well. So we had this really good 1992 under 21 side, and we're all 19 years of age, and about halfway through the season back then, Joel, I don't know whether you knew about this, so you seem a little bit probably too young to understand that on the one day there used to be the under 21s would play, and then the reserve grade would play, then first grade would play. And
used to go all the time, and my dad loved it. Bring it back, I say.
The good part about it is a true fan could turn up for the under-21s. They could watch a young player start his career, and they could watch his progression through reserve grade into first grade. So back then, we played under-21s versus Parramatta, and Parramatta were a really good under-21 side back then, and then sat on the bench for second grade and got on and played about 5 or 10 minutes of second grade, myself and Jamie Goddard. And then as we were about to jump in the shower after second grade, the first grade manager walked up and said, "Do you guys want to sit on the bench for first grade?" And we said, "Yeah, absolutely." I was just about to put my mouth into a pie. And he said, "Did you want to sit on the bench?" So we just sat on the bench at first grade, not thinking we're going to get on. And so I'll never forget, it was after a try was scored. It was about 10 minutes to go. And after a try was scored, and Wally Lewis was the captain coach, and he was really good to us young players, Wally. He always gave us a go. He gave us time as well. He always encouraged us at training. He was a tremendous guy, he was, at the club, especially to the young guys. And anyway, we were sitting there. I'll never forget, he was walking back with the one of the trainers, and he looked across at the bench and he said, I can still remember he mouthed the words. He said, "Give the two young fellas a go." So the trainer came over and said, "You two are on." And but Jamie Goddard and I looked at each other and we didn't know what to do. So we're standing on the sideline, nervous, and we were winning, I think, by about 16 or 18 points at that stage. So we probably weren't going to get beaten. And so we ran on the field. And all I remember was running across to a scrum and looking to my right, and the great Brett Kenny was playing for Parramatta. And so I packed into the scrum, and I thought all I want to do is get tackled by Brett Kenny. So we won the scrum, and I wrapped around the ruck and got the ball and ran into Brett Kenny. I thought, there you go, my debut. I got to play with the king and get tackled by Brett Kenny. So I was pretty happy after that. So yeah, and so myself and Jamie Goddard and Kevin Campion and Adrian Vowles all that year played our debuts, and so we were on our way then. We started young, and some of us had a few hiccups along the way, and had to restart again. But yeah, that was our first grade, my first grade debut. And as I said, I only ever wanted to play for the Gold Coast. That was my hometown. I was so proud to represent my hometown. But like the Gold Coast always has been, it's never been a real safe environment when it comes to rugby league.
No, yeah. With the Gold Coast and playing your junior footing out there, I know at the moment it's quite a successful junior nursery competition. It's a really big one as well. Was it like that back in the early 90s as well?
Yeah, the local competition. So I played Runaway Bay under 19s, and before we went and played with the Gold Coast. And back then, I think there may have been 19 teams in the comp. So that ranged from Beenleigh, which is halfway to Brisbane, as you would know, all the way out to Beaudesert.
Wow.
And then all the way down to Mullumbimby, which is, another 25 minutes over the New South Wales border. So yeah, a lot of teams really, really strong. And we went through under 19s in 1990. We went through undefeated, our Runaway Bay side. So it's a really, really strong competition, and still strong today, really strong in the schoolboys now with these sports excellence programs with Keebra and Palm Beach. And so Marymount College is another school that's trying to blend in with those schools. The great Matty Geyer is a teacher there, so he's trying to run that program there as well. So yeah, it's still pretty strong.
You mentioned a couple of all-time greats earlier, the King, Wally, Brett Kenny. What was it like, not just to play with the King on the field, but just his aura around the club as well? I know the Gold Coast there was sort of a newish club and we're still finding their feet. To have that aura around the club would have been something special.
It was intimidating as well, because he was the first real look into what superstardom was. And what I meant by that is that Wally was reading the news as well for Channel 10, I think. He was reading the news back then. And he used to arrive at training in a helicopter on the backfield. Yeah, so we'd all be kicking the ball around before training. All of a sudden they'd say, clear out, helicopter's coming in. So we'd have to clear off the backfield, and the helicopter would come into Seagulls and land, and he'd just jump off in his suit and stuff, and he'd go and get changed, and then we'd train, and then the helicopter would fly him back to Brisbane. And this is before he moved to the Gold Coast, and and then he had a sponsorship with a car dealership, and then he'd turn up in these little sports cars, and I thought, this is what superstardom's like. It's we'd go to Sydney, and our bus would pull up, and there would be just dozens and dozens of fans waiting at the hotel, just wanting to get a photo or get an autograph with Wally. So you sort of, as a kid, you sort of got off and you just all took it in your stride. And then all of a sudden you'd see what he'd go through every day, and you'd go, well, this is what Hollywood's like. So he was intimidating, but he was really good to the young guys. I know the older guys, they found it difficult at times to be on a level playing field with him, because he had such a great aura, like you said. He was just such a big personality, and so a lot of the older guys sort of, I think maybe they were intimidated by him, whatever it may be. But us young guys, we sort of, because we'd grown up watching Wally in State of Origin, for us he was our hero. So we just hung on every little word that he said. So And as I said, he was really good to us young guys. Yeah, his advice to us young guys like Campion and Goddard and Adrian Vowsenko was really, really good, really simple, but it made sense.
Yeah, look, if this is putting a pub quiz, I don't know many people who would be able to guess your next club after the Gold Coast Seagulls. And after 92, 93, 94, seeing you go to the eastern suburbs. So what happened there? Because I know Gold Coast is so close to your heart. What happened with the whole going to the eastern suburbs?
It was a decision made out of spite, to be honest. I never wanted to go to Sydney because I didn't like the fast-paced atmosphere of it all. And so there was myself. Another player actually played was Craig Weston, who was a really good young 5'8", who was, he was a super special sport Australian schoolboy, an amazing player. And Gold Coast were grooming him to really take over from Wally as an 18-year-old. So there was myself, Campo, Goddard, Craig Weston, and myself. And we were negotiating with the club, but they kept signing all the older players, the players that were like 29 and 30. And we had all this group of 19, 20-year-olds, which you could have made part of your future. And they were sort of more focusing on the older guys. We were sort of saying, well, what's going on? Why aren't they focusing on the young guys? Like, this is the future. So basically, I played against the Roosters one night and had a really good game. And I got a phone call the next morning from Mark Murray, the coach of. He just said, "Oh, we'd love to have a chat to you." So I had a chat to them and didn't take it seriously, to be quite honest. I didn't have a manager back then. I was used my father just spoke on my behalf, and I thought, who else better could you have than your old man? If he's going in to negotiate, he could half point intimidate people. So it's probably better than any manager you have. So they offered me a 3-year deal, and I went, wow, look, I'm 20, 21 years of age. How good's this? I wasn't emotionally mature enough to move to Sydney. I've got to admit that. But I thought, the Gold Coast will come back. And so myself and Craig Weston, Adrian Vowles, he went to the Cowboys, the new Cowboys team, and myself and Craig Weston went to the Roosters. And we all thought, it's just a matter of time before the Gold Coast come back and secure all the young players. And they sort of just sat on their hands. And so we got to a stage where we had to do something. So we made a decision out of spite, and I didn't enjoy it. I didn't enjoy it at all. I didn't like Sydney at the time. Like I said, I wasn't emotionally mature enough for it. And anyway, I about probably 5 or 6 weeks into the season, playing against the Broncos one night, and I had a really good game against the Broncos. Both Craig and I had a really good game in a beaten side, and I thought, it'd be good. We're playing first grade next week. It's a big match, and it's a grudge match, and we didn't get named in the side. And I thought, well, that happens, and a little bit disappointed. And so I played second grade the following week and broke my jaw. So I was out for 12 weeks. And basically back then you didn't have the support that you have now. It's basically you just left to your own devices, and I got homesick. And I asked for a release towards the end of the season and they granted it. And I went back and played for the South Queensland Crushers, which was exciting. It was a new team, 1995. I had an opportunity to go to the Cowboys to link up with my old coach, Grant Bell, from the Gold Coast. And I didn't do that. I went to the Crushers, and I'm not sure whether it was the right decision, but at the time it seemed like the right decision. But and everything was going okay, playing a bit of first grade, a bit of second grade, and then at the start of the season of 1996, we got told we weren't going to get paid. So the Super League ARL war, it was the ARL Super League war, and because my dad was a staunch ARL man, I said, I'm just going to stay with the ARL. I had a meeting with Super League, and I said, no, I'm going to stay with the ARL because my dad's a loyalist, and I was one of the. I didn't get any money out of it. I got a voucher to Harvey Norman or. One of those furniture, and I bought a fridge with it. So, but I stayed with the Crushers, and then we got told at the start of the 1996 year that we weren't going to get paid. So, I just bought my first house, and I was about to get married that year, and I thought, this game's supposed to look after you, rugby league. If you try really hard, if you train hard and look after yourself and look after the game, it usually looks after you. But got really disillusioned, to be quite honest. And Jolie and a lot of people sort of gave up the game, to be honest. But I made a conscious decision during '96 that things weren't going that great. So if I'm going to keep giving it a go, I've got to go back to where it started, peel all the layers back, and go back to where it started and start again. It's fortunate enough I was still young enough as well. So, and that's when I went back to the Gold Coast Chargers.
You mentioned the Gold Coast Chargers. I was around that Super League craziness period as well. Talk to us about that as a player. Like, we all hear about all those little interviews that happened and money getting thrown around like crazy. That must have just been a whirlwind of a period to be involved with rugby league.
Yeah, it was crazy. It sort of split up, not friendships, but allegiances at clubs for a short period, especially during 1995 going into 96, because they were hoping Super League would start in 1996 and it didn't. So in round one, if you were playing a Super League aligned club, which we were in round one, I think we were meant to play Canberra in 96, you had a bye, basically because of what the court decision was had been brought down. So, and then it went back to one competition again in 96, and there were players signing with. You were hearing about players that were playing on the bench in second grade getting checks for $50,000 for signing and then getting $80,000 or $100,000 a year. You go, what's going on here? So really it was first in, best dressed. And because of my dad and his allegiance with Ken Arthurson and co, I was always a guy that was just happy to play. I just wanted to play. It was never about really money. Money came with it, but it wasn't until I went to Penrith that you would be classed as paid handsomely. But leading up until then, I didn't really bother me. The ARL Super League, who's going to give you the most money, didn't concern me at all. And I remember when I went back to the Gold Coast Chargers, Jeff Carr, who was involved in the ARL, threw some money towards my contract to go back to the Chargers, which I was grateful for. But to be honest, it wouldn't have bothered me if I didn't get anything, because I just didn't believe in the fight. I didn't believe in what Super League were trying to do, and I just thought, our game is great. But moving forward, Super League was perfect. It's exactly what the game needed. It needed to go to another level. But back then, as a player, when you've been brought up in the game, like conceived in a dressing shed in Redfern and grown up in dressing sheds your whole life, you sort of just love the game for what it is. And it was never about money for me.
Look, you get to Penrith Panthers, and we may as well just fast forward and get straight to the tackle, the world famous. I'll argue people say it's one of the best tackles of all time. Talk us through that moment, because you're at the grand final for the Penrith Panthers. Massive game, massive occasion, and you managed to come up with arguably the greatest tackle that we've ever seen.
Yeah, first and foremost, Penrith, great club, great region, great community, just really, really good people. And in 2000, at the end of 2001, Royce Simmons was terminated from his job. I had a really good relationship with Royce as a coach and player, and still class him as a really close friend today. And he was a really, really good coach. I rated him highly as a coach. He's very calculated about his coaching. If you trained hard, he really liked you, and he's a really hard taskmaster. And maybe that brought his downfall in the end. I think a lot of players were thinking that we're sort of not moving with the times when it came to sports science, whatever it may be. And unfortunately, he lost his job. And then John Lang came in from Cronulla, and an interesting story about John Lang. I'll get to that really soon. Which the connection that I had with John Lang that I didn't realise that I had, and John Lang had never told me about it. My dad had never told me about it. But anyway, John Lang comes to the club, and very simple coach in relation to his methodologies and really basic coaching, which everyone sort of really loved. But my very first training session with Langy, he said to me, I want you to play an old-fashioned locks game. He said, so, do all these different things that I want you to do that a lock does. But if the ball is on the other side of the field on the fifth tackle, and there's going to be a kick put in, if you're on the opposite side of the field where the ball is, he said, I just want you to start heading in behind the defensive line just in case you need it. He used to always say, just in case you need it.
Yeah.
And so on that night, I saw Gerds come from the left-hand side where I was, and he sort of ran behind me on about tackle 4, and then it was tackle 5, and he ran down the right-hand side, which, generally he wasn't normally on that side, and he just tried to put a grubber in, and it come off the feet of Luke Ricketson. And just as he was about to kick it, I just sort of, Langy told me, and so I just started heading in behind. And it's a little bit like Daly Cherry Evans in the State of Origin. As soon as he saw Cameron Munster, if you go and look at the footage again, as soon as he sees Cameron Munster go down that left-hand side and he's going to put a grub, Daly just sort of starts taking off just in case. So he gets a bit of a head start, and that's exactly what I did because my coach told me to do it. And Ricochet and Freddie gives this pass out to Toddy, and there's a beautiful pass in the wet conditions from Freddie, straight out in front, and Toddy didn't have to sort of deviate his run at all. And Luke Lewis, to his credit, he sort of half point checked him on the way, and because it was a wet night, I was able to. You head towards the corner post, and I was always taught as a young kid, just head towards the corner post and try and keep the player sort of on the edge of your eyesight. If the player's in full view of your eyesight, you're not going to get him. But head towards the corner post, and if you see the player just sort of edging into the corner of your eyesight, you've still got him in your periphery. And fortunately for me, that's what happened with Toddy. As I started to head towards the corner post, so I got to that mark before he did, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And it allowed me to sort of pull up a little bit. And as he came into the picture, that was when I was able to make really good contact on him. And being a wet night, we were always going to slide into touch. And I thought Daly was pretty lazy, actually, not throwing Steve Crichton into touch. But
Queenslanders are harsh.
Yeah. But in saying that, and if it was a dry night, he would have burnt me. It was just, all the planets aligned that night for us at the Panthers. Even though we were the minor premiers, we went in as massive underdogs, and we just had to withstand that first sort of 20, 25 minutes where we knew they were going to come out and just try and just knock down our front door. And fortunately for us, we withstood it, and then we came over the top of them. But in relation to that moment, it was. Johnny Lang prepared me for that moment from the very first time I had a meeting with him when he arrived at the end of 2001 in the preseason. So, I did that every training session, every game for 2 years, and then my last game for Penrith, it was really one of the only times it was required.
The stars aligned. In that moment, do you sort of just black out and it's just you and Todd? You're chasing him, or can you hear the crowd? Can you hear him erupt once it's made? Can you hear your players cheer and celebrating?
You can't hear the crowd, funnily enough. There's 83,000 people, and you can't really hear the crowd. It's really silent. I found it was really, really silent, and everything seemed like it was in slow motion. And then but the one thing I could hear, funnily enough, I could hear Reece Wesser behind me, and my nickname was Scooter at Penrith, and all I could remember was Reece saying, I got your inside, Scooter. I got your inside. So I thought, if Toddy stepped back in, Reece would be there.
Yeah.
And then, obviously, when we hit the ground, and in the footage, I sort of rolled back and looked back towards my teammates. And as soon as that happened, that's when you can hear the yahooing. And I remember Tony Puletua. If you look at that footage, there's an angle that's up the touch line, straight up the touch line from behind the try line, and you can see Tony Puletua like hovering over the top of Toddy Byrne, sort of sledging him in the moment. Everyone's full of adrenaline, and all I could remember was Tony Puletua like hovering over the top of him, yahooing and sledging him, and then you could hear the crowd. But for that 4 or 5 seconds, it was really just stony silence. It's an eerie feeling, to be quite honest.
Yeah, I could definitely imagine that for sure. Look, I'll put you on the spot here. Your 2003 team was off the chain. When you go back and look at the lineup, the players, the form that they were all in, it was absolutely freakish team. Well, I want to compare. I want one game. It's 2003 Penrith team versus the 2021, 2022 sort of combined team. There was a few little changes, but overall, it was the same sort of squad for both of those for Penrith. Who comes out on top?
I've been asked this question a couple of times, and of course I'm always going to say I reckon we win.
Yeah.
I think it goes down to Golden Point.
Yeah.
And then it comes down who's the best sharpshooter. So, yeah, you'd think Cleary would win that, but then that year Gower knocked over a couple of really crucial field goals. One against the Brisbane Broncos midway through the year. We won 13-6. I think he kicked it from about 42 metres out, and it hit a bloke in about the fourth row of the Northern Grandstand at Suncorp. I reckon it goes down to Golden Point. Now, many would say that the current Penrith side or the back-to-back Premier side, they've been together for a long time. They know how each other play. Well, so did ours as well. You know, the likes of Rooney, Lewis, Rodney, Swain, Waterhouse, they all played together. They've all played junior reps together. So it's much – and when you weigh up the players as well, Joel, you go, well, I think Reece Westwood gets it over top of Dylan Edwards. You know, that year I think he scored 25 or 26 tries. He was next level for about 3 years there, Reece. The two wingers, when you got Toto and who was there? There's May or there's Charlie Staines. Who was the other winger that was there?
You've got
in the grand final side. There was
you got Crichton obviously on centres. You got May, Targo.
I think Luke Lewis and Brian Toa, if you weigh them up against each other, there's two completely different players. But you know, Luke Lewis is a superstar, absolute superstar, and so is Toto. And Luke Rooney and Tyrrell, I think Luke Rooney wins that battle. And then you got Girdler on Stephen Crichton.
Wow.
Yes, right. I'd love to see. I'd pay money to go and see that battle because Girdler was just, he could have played in any era. And then you look at Preston and Jerome Luai. They're very much the same sort of player. Presto's probably a little bit more consistent. Then you got Gow versus Cleary. You know, they play the same as well. Yeah. You know, they're good defenders. They're low to the ground. They're powerful. They're super fit. So, you know, and then when they won that comp, they had Tony Pultu up against Viliami Kikau. You got Api Koroisau up against Luke Priddis. And you've got James Fisher-Harris up against Martin Lang.
It's ridiculous.
You know, it's when you weigh it up, there's not much between both sides. So I reckon it goes to Golden Point, and I think Girdler scores a late try, or Gower kicks a field goal.
Oh, and it's a big game, so we all know Crichton will get one of his token intercepts in the big game. But I've got no doubt you're there in cover defence. You're getting him, sliding him out into the sideline this time. So,
well, you talk about intercepts. Girdler was the intercept king. So,
yeah. They can have one each. The last year of your career saw you move to the West Tigers. And in this, you're actually named captain of the club. I often wonder, because you hear in the media a lot of times they bag clubs if they put new players as captain, things like that. For you, how did that feel, that period where you knew at the club and straight away you're thrown into the leadership role of an organisation?
Apprehensive at first. The reason why I went to the Tigers is I was promised halfway through the year if I was going okay at Penrith, I'd get another 2 years. I was 31, but I really looked after myself fitness-wise. And when I made Origin in 2003, they didn't come with a contract, and that really disappointed me. I thought that at the time they went back on their word. But then I understood later on in life they had a lot of younger players they had to upgrade. Your Waterhouses and your Lewises and Rooneys, and I didn't understand that at the time. I did later on when I understood the salary cap. So when I was forced to go to another club, and I signed with the West Tigers before the season had finished. And the reason why I went there is, one, Roy Simmons was there, and I always enjoyed his coaching. He was the assistant coach, I just admired Tim Sheens ever since I was a teenager when he coached those Raiders teams. So I wanted to be coached by Tim Sheens. Yeah. So going there was a really easy decision. Tim called me in, and I went there with confidence. So when you say, how are you feeling about getting asked to be captain? I went in there with confidence because we just won a comp. So we did the World Sevens. That was the last World Sevens that year, and I was captain of that, and we won that. We beat Parramatta in the grand final. We were the last World Sevens champions. And so he called me into the office after the World Sevens, and he said, I want you to captain the club. And I said, I'm not comfortable with that because I haven't been at the club long. And there's been a lot of players here that have been at the club their whole careers, like Darren Centre was there for a majority of his career. Mark O'Neill was there. He'd been there his whole career. I said, he said, and he basically said to me, he said, the Tigers they're coming from well back in the field. You know, they've never made the finals. We need a change. So I decided that I wouldn't do it initially. I'll be the club captain, where I'll do all the media, I'll do all that, help all the young players. But when we run out on the field, I won't be the captain of the team, if that makes sense. That needs to be someone that's been involved with the club for a while. So Darren Centre started the club, and in the second game, he broke his arm. So I just took over the captaincy after that and really enjoyed it, really enjoyed it. And we're travelling really well there for a large portion of the season. They made some good signings that year. There was Paddy Richards, Brett Hodgson, Scott Prince, Toddy Payton from the Roosters as well, Benny Reynolds, who was a young half from Penrith as well, Jason Moody, the winger from Parramatta.
Yeah.
So it was really good signings, and we're going really well throughout the year. And then we've got a heap of injuries, and we had to win one of the last 3 games, and we didn't win one of those games. We got beaten by the Cowboys, Broncos, and Newcastle, and we missed out. We came 9th. We missed out in the finals. And then I still had another year to go on the contract, and about 6 weeks to go before the end of the season, I was running back in defence against Melbourne one night, and my knee locked up. I had a knee that was just sort of starting to get on its last leg, and it locked up one day during the game, and it kept locking up at training. And I went out to word to Tim Sheens and Stephen Noyce, the CEO, and I said, listen, I won't get through another preseason. I just won't do it. I won't be able to do it. I'll be stealing your money if I did. So we made the decision. I made the decision I was going to retire at the end of the year, and had a really good year. It was one of my better years in 2004. It was a really enjoyable year, and I loved being captain. And so 2004, and then December 2004, I'd moved back to the Gold Coast, and I retired. And I got a phone call from Tim saying, "Can you come back?" I went, "Oh, mate, I don't know about my knee." You know, he said, "Mate, I'd love you to be able to come back." And I said, "Mate, I'm happy with my decision." And my knee still wasn't great; still sort of swelling up after I did. And usually it's 2 days later. I'll give you a call after 2 days. He goes, okay. So I went for a run, and then 2 days later it blew up again. And I couldn't walk. And then I rang him back. I said, nah, my knee's blowing up. He said, doesn't matter. You just do the captain session. Just do the captain session. Day before the game, we'll get you through the week. I said, mate, it wouldn't be a good look for the club and the young players. So 2005, they go and win the comp. So and then at the end of Mad Monday, they were on Mad Monday after winning the comp, the West Tigers, in 2005. And Tim Sheens' name came up on my phone. It was 6:15 in the morning. And I answered, I said, "Oh, congratulations, coach. You know, well done." He said, "Some of the decisions we make are sometimes not the right ones, are they?" I went, "Oh." He rang up to rub it in. Yeah.
Oh, that's fantastic. You mentioned the Queensland Maroons, and obviously we've just seen another series where that Queensland spirit's really shone through. And as a New South Wales supporter, that really pains me to say, but I think we've seen it now more than ever, just how much that spirit is, how strong it is, and how frequent it is there for you guys when you pull on that Maroons jersey. How did it feel for you to pull that, finally get that jersey in 2003 and to be on that field wearing that Maroons jersey?
Well, it was a dream come true. I'm just going to let my dog out. That's what I think.
Nah, that's all right.
It was a dream come true. It was I was 31, so as Queenslanders, you never think you're too old because we've never had that many players to pick from, in history. And I came through an era where I was always up against Gordy Tallis, Tony Carroll, Brad Thorne, those sort of players when it came to Origin. And, I I'd been told through 99 and 2000 and 2001 that I was a bee's dick away from making it. And, it's just unfortunate that I was up against a lot of these superstars in the back row. And, so, a lot of the Broncos players really dominated those Origin sides in those late 90s and early 2000s. They'd played in grand finals, they'd won comps, and you could understand why. And so when I finally got the jersey, I got a phone call from my best mate, Clinton O'Brien, who'd played Origin in 97, 98, and then won a comp with Newcastle in 2001. And he rang me and said, "Oh, congratulations." I said, "What for?" He said, "Oh, you're in the Origin side." I said, What are you talking about?" He said, "Yeah, they just named it. You've been named." So then I got a phone call from the QRL saying, you got to be on a plane tomorrow morning. I went, "I'd love to. I'll get to the airport tonight. I'll sleep there." And great experience. Wayne was the coach. I expected to go in there and learn this whole new way to play rugby league under Wayne Bennett. And then you realise that actually he's the most simplistic coach you'd ever come across. Doesn't have any sort of huge game plans or anything like that. It's all about effort and discipline and being really good defensively. And I was roomed with Petro Sivanasiva, who was just the nicest man in the world. And I remember sitting on the end of the bed after about day 2, and I said, "When do we start looking into the opposition? When do we start breaking down the other side?" And he said, "No, we don't. There's no game plan." He said, "Just don't miss a tackle, be disciplined, be really aggressive and energetic, be there for your mate. And when Lockie wants the ball, give it to him." That was it. So it was a great 10 days, best 10 days of your life. And, we're glad that cameras aren't around these days. Some of the things you get up to when you're having a beer in those first 2 or 3 days, and you're learning who the characters are of the side. And, Sean Berrigan, he's like the rat bag of the side. And, the Gordy Tallis is the loudest one of the side. And Benny
still
Eichen,
is.
and Benny Eichen was always up the front of the bus on the microphone, which then led to a career in the media as well. So, Wayne. A lot of people see Wayne Bennett, and they see this real serious guy that doesn't talk to the media, but behind closed doors, he lives vicariously through his players. Because he doesn't drink. He's never drank. He's never smoked. He's never really partied or anything like that. So, you'd always be at the back of the bus listening to the stories. What happened last night? Who did what? And as Gordy and Tony Carroll, continuously sledging Wayne, and Wayne trying to sledge them back, and it was, he makes some really good friends out of it as well. The game itself is it's a blur, to be honest. Yeah. I remember running out onto Homebush Stadium first because you're the away side, and then New South Wales ran on, and I'd never felt the inside of my body shake like it had. Like the bones inside your body are shaking because of the noise of the crowd, 85,000. It was just, grand final's a different night because you're sharing the crowd with rugby league fans and the opposition. And with State of Origin, it's basically just 95% one state. So I remember standing there waiting for New South Wales to run out, and then they ran out, and I just felt my body shake. It was, I'd never felt, and still to this day, I've never felt a feeling like it. Yeah. To the point where you actually feel a little bit concerned about what's going on. Like you lose your bearings of all your surroundings. And now I sort of see what it means when you're Queenslander behind at Suncorp Stadium, and they say the crowd gets you home in those State of Origin matches, because that's what New South Wales would feel like when the crowd starts to make it feel like a coliseum. So, it was a great experience. You get a little bit filthy. You didn't get to experience it a little bit more actually throughout your career, and you get really envious of the guys that end up playing, 15, 20, 30, 40 Origins. Yeah. They get to experience the camp every year, because it's just it's a lot of fun.
Yeah, I want to ask one final question on the playing career. Then I want to hopefully get into a quick couple of our post-season questions, and I'm taking a bit of your time. The last one here, and this is for a personal one. I can relate to this with my dad, my old man, and then my pop as well. He played for Parramatta, and when my dad was growing up playing junior footy, and that he was always referred to. Pop was always referred to, saying how good he was, things like that. And he ended up moving to soccer, my dad, because he said the noise sort of got a bit too much. And Pop was always supportive of his decision. He said, if that's what you want to play, go play it. I don't need you to play footy if you don't want to do it. How was it for you? Obviously, in the footsteps of an all-time great of the game and immortal. And then was there the second part of the question, was South Sydney ever an option for you to play at?
First part, it was pretty easy actually. My old man, he was a tough dad. Very loving dad, but very tough when it came to anything you had to put an effort into. If you didn't put an effort into something, he'd be really disappointed in you. And that was just in life. And going through those teenage years, I didn't start playing rugby league until I was about 12. And then those sort of 13, 14, 15, 16-year age, it was pretty difficult because all the parents put so much pressure on you. The kids didn't care. They didn't know.
Yeah.
But then when you got into grade, when you're playing lower grades like under 21s and reserve grade, a lot of expectation from other coaches, media, whatever it may be. But when you make first grade, I don't think anyone cares, to be honest. You always get referred to the son of, and that doesn't bother me in the slightest. I wear it as a badge of honour, to be quite honest. And if I had a shit game one night and the old man would ring me, if he'd say to me, if he didn't say anything about the game at all, you knew that he was disappointed in your game.
Yeah.
Or he'd say something like, didn't go too well for you last night, did it? Which means there's some things in that game that he didn't think were that crash hot. So, it was pretty easy actually. He was always a really good wealth of knowledge. He's a wealth of knowledge to go to and ask about the game, and you'd be silly not to utilise that. And I did during my career. I utilised it a fair bit. I remember he always said to me when I first started looking like I was going to get graded as like an 18, 19-year-old, he just said to me, listen, you're never going to be a John Raper or a Ron Coote, because I was playing back row by that stage. I started out as a hooker in my juniors and I went into the back row. He said, you're never going to be a John Raper or a Ron Coote. He said, but just train harder than everyone else. Don't let anyone outwork you. And so I took on that for pretty much, I reckon, probably 10 years of the 13 years that I played. There was a couple of years there where I dropped off a little bit from a coach and from a training perspective, which is my own fault. He was always very supportive. And like I said, I used to wear it as a badge of honour. And the second part of the question, there was two opportunities to play for South. The first time was when I looked like leaving the Gold Coast Chargers. I was talking to Penrith, Manly and South. And I said to Dad, I'm never going to go to South because that's your club and we wear the same jersey, and I'm going to tarnish your reputation there if I get injured or play crap footy or whatever it may be. And it was the best decision because they got kicked out of the comp a couple of years later. And then he said, well, who's it out of? I said, Manly or Penrith. He said, if you play for Manly, I'll never watch you play rugby league ever again. So
I second that.
And then when I was going to leave Penrith, I was talking to Bradford Bulls in England. And I was talking to South and the West Tigers. And then I wasn't ready to go to the UK because I had a young family. And I didn't want to go to South for the same reason. That's why it made it pretty easy to go where Tim Sheens and Royce Simmons were.
Yeah. Now let's get away from the footy boots. You put the suit and tie on, and 2006 became the football manager of the Gold Coast Titans. Talk to us about what actually is involved with that title, and I imagine you've got to be on the phone 24/7, really.
Well, I was going to join the police force when I retired, or the army, to be quite honest. It's still a regret that I never served. I would have loved to have joined the armed forces, but in saying that, I just as I was about to retire, John Cartwright, Michael Searle, who was then the owner of the Gold Coast Titans, and he contacted me when I told him I was going to retire because he was my manager at the time. He said, "Listen, I'm putting together this Gold Coast NRL bid." He said, "Would you?" And he said, I started talking about potential coaches, guys that I'd come across in the game.
Yeah. And
John Cartwright was going to be the coach, and I had a link with John Cartwright from the Penrith Panthers. He was a second grade coach there and under 20s coach there for a while, so I got to know him pretty well. And being a former legend of the club, I made a point of getting to know him. And so when he got the job, he rang me and said, "Would you like to be my strength?" So this only a week after I retired, I was working in the office of the NRL bid team. on the Gold Coast because I'd moved straight back. And John Cartwright said to me, "Do you want to be my strength and conditioner if we get the license?" I said, "I'd love to." And so put everything else a little bit on hold, like joining the army or the police force. And then as I was helping out with the NRL bid team, I was doing a lot of stuff on junior development, junior recruitment. We were signing players around the Gold Coast, Brisbane and Northern Rivers areas just in case we got the license. And I said to the then Michael Searle and John Cartwright, I said, "Listen, I'm really enjoying the operations side of it." So he said, "Okay, if you can get me a really good conditioner, if we get the license, you can do the general manager of rugby league role." I said, "Love to." So we get the license in May 2005. And then I went to Billy Johnston, who I'd known from the Gold Coast Giants playing days and the Gold Coast Seagulls, where he was the conditioner. He was the hardest conditioner in the NRL at that stage. He was at the now North Queensland Cowboys. And I was able to convince him to be the first strength and conditioner for the Gold Coast Titans. And so he came down from Townsville and I just assumed the general manager role. So the role was essentially, when you're starting a startup club, is you've got to set up the entire department, the rugby league department. That means your facilities, all your resources, and your staffing, from your head coach to your assistant coaches to your pathway coaches to all your junior development programs, your pathway programs, all your scouts as well around the country in New Zealand, oversee or assist in the salary cap as well, the first grade and the junior salary cap, and also do all the senior recruitment as well, along with the coach and the CEO. So basically, it was from scratch, setting up everything from woe to go. And
not much sleep back then.
Nah, not a lot of sleep at all. Really enjoyable, but you know when you're doing something and basically the hours just get away from you. It's like if you're talking to. You're doing what you're doing now. You love doing your podcast. You love talking rugby league, and all of a sudden you look at the time and you go, "There's an hour and a half gone. I didn't even realise it." So It's a little bit like that, and it was really beneficial putting a team together, and we were very precise in who we recruited in those first years. One, we wanted them to be family men, that they had a child, so they got another responsibility. They're not so selfish, and the other one was, what was their work ethic and training ethic like from the feedback. So that was another part of the job. You had to do a lot of connecting with people in the game and doing a lot of research and due diligence on players and seeing how they're accepted by their teammates. Are they family men? Do they make the right decisions? Are they good trainers first and foremost? And that's how we were able to put together the likes of Luke Bailey and Scott Prince and Preston Campbell and Anthony LaFranchi and Matt Rogers. And it was a really.
Did you play quite a part in getting Presto there then? Obviously, because you played with him at Penrith and had that relationship.
I had a really good relationship with Scott Prince from the West Tigers. We got on really. We travelled to training together. So the first two people that I called were Preston and Scott Prince.
Yep.
And Preston said, "I can't believe it took you this long to call me," because he always wanted to get back to the Gold Coast where he played his
similar to you.
Chargers. And Princey, who I knew really well, he was dying to get back to Queensland, and he was still under contract with the Tigers, and they allowed him to negotiate with the Queensland teams only. And but we already had him. We had him tied up pretty early, and that was really a catalyst to putting together a really good squad.
One final one on this. You're part of another bid, the Brisbane Jets bid. What sort of part did you play in that? Obviously, that's a recent one where the Dolphins did win that bid, but just take us inside the four walls, if you can, a little bit about how the whole bid process does work.
Well, first and foremost, the NRL have to put out sort of like a tender to say, we are going to expand the competition. The major brainchild behind the Brisbane Jets was Steve Johnson, who was the chairman of the Ipswich Jets, and also Nick Livermore, who's a really good entrepreneur out of Brisbane. His father, Ross Livermore, was the boss of the Queensland Rugby League for many, many years through the 70s and 80s and 90s. So he asked me to come on board because I've been involved previously. And what goes about a bid is, first, financially, you have to make sure you got the backers, and you got to make sure you have capital, anywhere upwards of around sort of $15 to $20 million, just to get you in the front door. And then you got to start putting together programs like what are your junior development programs, your pathway programs like? What's your fan engagement like? What's your membership programs like? How are you going to entice fans to follow your club if they follow other clubs? Where's your home ground going to be? What's your facilities going to be like from a high performance point of view? So putting all that together from start to finish and then delivering that to the NRL. I still think the NRL got it wrong. We went in knowing that the Dolphins were going to get it. I think both us and the Firehawks were of the understanding that the Dolphins were probably the least threat to the Brisbane Broncos from a fan and membership perspective. So we both probably knew that the Dolphins are always going to be in the box seat from a stakeholders' point of view in the NRL. So, but we went in swinging, and both us and the Firehawks, and I still think that the NRL got it wrong because the numbers in the Western Corridor all the way up through Toowoomba and the Darling Downs is just, it's phenomenal, the numbers. And with the Brisbane Lions setting up their training base out there, especially with the AFL women's competition as well.
They know.
I felt as though probably the NRL has opened the gate for them out there. So it's not too late, but it's a decision whether the NRL want to go out there or not, I think.
Well, was it true that the Jets and Firehawks were happy to work together to win the bid at the late stages?
Yeah, so when all three bids met on the morning at the QRL offices with the NRL, the ARLC, I was driving back down the Gold Coast and Shane Richardson rang me, who was the head of the Firehawks, and said, how would you think about joining both our bids? And I think we both accepted that I think it was a positive way forward for the game. Yeah. You could have a position in the CBD, so you got like a cross-city rivalry with the Brisbane Broncos, which everyone loves. Yeah. And then you've got that Western Corridor that's also being attended to from a development point of view as well. So I thought it would have been the perfect scenario for the NRL and the ARLC, but they thought otherwise. I always thought their decision was always made, but like anything, you got to go in swinging and see how you go.
Just a quick one, final one to end this one. Do you feel like there's a chance we could see a fifth Queensland team? Is there room in the game for that?
Yeah, there definitely is. I know the big push is for the Pacifica, which I used to be a fan of, but I don't think if you based it out of Cairns, for example, you're taking away from the backyard of the Cowboys. I know there's a big push for the Western Australia because of the broadcasting times. Makes sense. I'm just not quite sure with a collision sport like ours that injuries would play a huge role in the depth of the team in the West with the amount of travel that you got to do. I know the AFL do it, but the AFL isn't as much as of a collision sport as what ours is. I do believe the most obvious one would be Ipswich / Toowoomba. Yeah, just from a population point of view, purely a population point of view. I think the two ones that would make sense from a population point of view would be the Western Corridor and probably WA.
You've won me over. So, look, last couple of rapid fire questions. I like to end these interviews with 4 questions. I've got first one's the most enjoyable player you've ever played with.
Tony Puletua.
Yep.
Just on his day, he is destructive, but off the field, one of the most enjoyable human beings to be around.
One of the Hair Bears as well.
Yeah.
The most talented player you've played with, and I'll tell you what, names you've mentioned, you've played with a number.
Most talented, probably Preston Campbell. He's great at multi-sports. He was tiny in size, huge heart, and never let anyone ever get over the top of him. So overall talent, I'd have to say him. There's a kid I played with at school, but I know Robbie Hollingsworth is the best player I ever saw.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. The most enjoyable player you've played with, and you can have this for either on or off the field, or maybe one for each.
Most enjoyable player off the field, I'd say Tony Puletua again, or Jamie Goddard. He's as loyal as they come, Jamie Goddard. He's funny, he's ruthless, he's dangerous, but he's really loyal as well.
Funniest player you've played with?
Funniest player, this is getting a little bit boring. Tony Puletua. he's the funniest guy. He's the funniest guy that I think both he and Craig Gower. Craig Gower's a really funny guy. Craig Gower's a different sort of humor. It's a real sort of dark black humor.
Yeah. How about MG? He's a very dry.
MG's another one. MG's a real character, a real comic, and just he's a mad kleptomaniac. He used to steal your clothes at training, all that sort of stuff. But you just laughed at him because it was MG. You just sort of accepted it because he was just such a funny guy. But him, Tony Paultour, and Gower were really, really funny guys.
Well, Scotty, we've got to wrap this up. Just finally, where can people find you? I know you got yourself a business or two, and you've also SEN Radio. Where can we catch you if people want to listen to you?
So, work for SEN and the Super Radio Network as well. Pick up our show. So it's Sats and Rats. So myself and Matty Rogers. It used to be Gary Belcher. He's retired now. So we're on SEN and the Super Radio Network every night from 6 till 8 o'clock, 2-hour show. We also call the footy as well, SEN League each weekend, and also on the SEN app as well. All the Sports Day shows are on there. So, and I know when you reached out, you said you listened to the show, and much appreciated.
Yeah, on the podcast as well. So the shows are always put up on that. That's the main way I listen to them all. Quickly, I've got to ask you, who's going to win the comp this year?
Oh, I can't see at the moment. I can't see anyone beating Penrith. They're too good defensively. But if there is a team that can beat them, I think the Melbourne Storm can on their day. And I think even though South Sydney is sitting 8th, they'll have 2 more buys and they'll be up. If they get in the top 4, I think South on their day we're going to be pretty difficult to beat as well.
Look, this is credit to you, how good of a bloke you are. I asked for 40, 45 minutes of your time. We're going well over that. So I'll let you go on your day off. Really appreciate the time, Scotty. Enjoy your day off. Please have a relaxing beer or so. You got some footy to call over the weekend?
Got the game to call tonight, which is the Warriors and the Bunnies.
Cracking game.
Yeah.
That'd be a cracker. All right, perfect. Thank you, mate. Thanks for joining League of Inches. We'll hopefully have a chat to you in the future.
Love to. Catch you later.